we're living in a world where data is being produced all around us, whether directly we want it, whether it's your video camera here or whether it's your phone reception collecting I know where you are from your GPS, and that's being sent to Optus or Telstra or whoever, and now we can geocode where you've been and where you go. And so it's really working in that world where we need the algorithms and the software infrastructure and the cloud and high performance computers to process all of this and make sense of it. Because most people can't do very much with it on their own. They need large-scale resources to do a lot of the crunching of the data to tell particular research questions, answer research questions, or just things that are of interest to society as a whole, I guess.
So when people talk about big data, it's a complex thing because actually it's lots of little data and lots of little data that's held in different places, all in different places. Some of it's government data that's open data, freely available, but most of it is now data that sits elsewhere, owned by someone else who may or may not choose to share that data.
So the data volumes are growing. Data sets, individual data sets are growing in size. We have enormous amounts of new satellite imagery data, which is used a lot in environmental and other sciences to help us get a picture of what's happening. There's velocity, so the speed at which data is coming in. So in the past, satellites would pass over a given point every 26 days, and now you're getting repeat visits on a daily basis. So the speed at which data is coming in. Think of Facebook data or Twitter. And the third V is the variety. So in the past, we had more formal, authoritative sources of data, and now we're getting new kinds of data. We're getting data which are, you could think of as digital smoke signals. So they're the transactions of citizens going about their business on the web. Your browser history, the way you interact with retailers online, the way you interact with government services. So those kinds of data as well, very new data. So big data is a combination of all of those things, which kind of creates a bit of a data deluge and creates a lot of problems in terms of governing the data, doing the right thing with the data, managing the data, pulling it together so that you can do smart things with it, and then, of course, interpreting the results depending on the kind of data that you use.
The advent of computers and the access to computers have meant that, collection of data has almost become trivial. And over time, businesses have started to develop a thirst and an understanding for the fact that the more they know about their markets, the more they know about their products and their services, the easier it is to sell.
A lot of these sort of commercial companies like Twitter and Instagram and Flickr and Foursquare, they're collecting data all the time, and they use it for business. So they're marketing and Facebooks of this world, that's how they make all the revenue. And so they're profiling people. If I like a certain thing, then I might be interested in buying these products. And that's kind of what a lot of the Googles and the Facebooks do. And they actually offer you ways for you to access that data. So some do, some don't. They're not all standardized. So we can certainly access Twitter data. So you can write some software which will connect to Twitter and pull out tweets in Melbourne, for example. And you can then start tracking people. And then you can start looking at where do you buy your clothes, or where do you go to drink your coffee. So it's very easy to do this. And then we can, not just for you, we can then find who do you follow and who follows you. And we can start building up your network about how you interact with people in virtual space and how does that relate to the real space. So, and a lot of these commercial providers or social media platforms provide access for anyone to suck out the data. And that's kind of what we do.
And of course we learned a great deal during conflict, during the wars, and the collection of intelligence, and the collation of that intelligence, the secret intelligence at that, and the analysis of all of that, became part and parcel of what the intelligence services did. And that, unfortunately, is one of the darker sides of big data because it's pervaded, society since then. So the growth of that data is really about what advantage can we get about understanding what we do, and what is it in terms of that raw information that can be used. And I think it's fair to say that the larger and the longer the larger the data set and the longer it's been collected, the more precious it becomes. and you know, the ability to do empirical analysis now is almost taken for granted, provided the data's been collected.
Well, when we first started thinking about big data, I suppose we weren't thinking about big data in the way that it's often spoken about in the media, where, you know, every transaction, everything I buy, all that information is collected. In our case, when we were thinking about big data originally, we were thinking about all of the information around, say if it was the environment for the southwest region of Victoria, what information already exists that we can bring together, and then as we work with the community or with other organisations in the region for them to share what they know, that it would be a much more comprehensive insight into the knowledge that's already been confirmed in a particular place.
In any given domain, across society, in any given industry, thousands and thousands of different information systems. And for most things that we do, most decisions we're looking for, most analysis, we need to be able to pull data from lots of different places. So each individual system contains some data. It may have some functionality that enables a user to get the answer they want, but typically we need to pull data together from lots and lots of different information systems.
Pre the Internet of Things, in the old days, we used to be data poor. So we'd have a little bit of money, we'd go out and we'd do the monitoring that we needed to do to answer the question we thought we had to answer. That's how data was used. You had a problem, you thought you had a problem, or you needed to monitor to check you didn't have a problem, and you set up your monitoring regimes around that. The world's changed now. We can actually get information through sensors that in a much more real-time fashion than the old ways could have ever given us. We've moved from a data poor environment to a data rich environment. The big data concept, it's about a richness of information. Information is no longer, or data is no longer our issue. It's making sense of the data that is really difficult, and that's the role for governments.
So some data sets are massive by nature. Satellite data sets, time series data sets that are collected by sensors, might be air quality or groundwater levels or things like that. There are some data sets like Twitter or Facebook social data sets that may be very large as well. But a lot of data sets are just collected, like soil data, for example, might only be collected once a year in the paddock by the farmer, but terribly important data. And if you marry that by all the farmers in Australia and all the paddocks and all the data that's being collected, and if you could put all that together, now that would be a big data set. But it's actually made up of small pieces of data, you know, that are being collected.
When you start to bring together all of these disparate data and information sources, whether they're documents, whether they're photos, whether they're information that might have been in spreadsheets or reports or whatever, once you start to bring all of that information together in a way that can be found and accessed and interrogated and reused, then I think you start to get to big data.